Hello, it is December 11th, and you're watching news from Kazakhstan on K+. Hungarian national Laszlo Bata was found hanged near the border post of Atarau airport. According to preliminary information, he committed suicide due to a misunderstanding with his documents.
According to the airport employees, Laszlo Bata was deported from Turkey. He spent 3 days in Atarau awaiting his flight back to Istanbul and then to Hungary. However, he broke down and committed suicide. Prior to the tragedy, Laszlo Bata allegedly told the Kazakh customs servants why he had problems with his travel ID. Upon working at a construction company for 1 year, he was returning home. However, in the transit airport of Borispol in Ukraine, the customs servants told him that his travel ID was forged and charged him with terrorism. They broke the laminated seal of his passport, drew up a statement and deported him to Turkey. According to Laszlo, then he was supposed to be deported back to the homeland, Hungary, but instead they put him on the plane to Atarau. The Atarau customs servants say that the foreigner just lost it and hanged himself on the cord of his own shoe at night outside the customs office. The 41-year-old Laszlo Bata had a family in Hungary. The police is currently investigating the real cause of suicide. A criminal case has been instigated. He stayed over at the airport for 3 days waiting his flight to Istanbul because there was none. However, we suspect that he emotionally stressed. He was found dead by hanging. No traces of violent death were detected. According to him, his passport had been already damaged when he arrived at the Borispol airport, where the customs service of Ukraine claimed that he had a forged passport.
Well-known public activist and chief editor of Gulzhan.org website, Gulzhan Yergalieva, shared with its users information on why it was shut down and why she was fined for $100. Our correspondents followed the events surrounding the website.
The chief editor of Gulzhan.org internet media resource, Gulzhan Yergalieva, suspects that the website takedown was instigated by the prosecutor general, who was grieved at the latest publications. I believe that the most likely website termination initiator was the General Prosecutor Dolbayev. That's probably because we posted information on his upcoming dismissal. However, according to Yergalieva, this is just one of the primary leads. The alleged causes range from mass media sweeping purge before the tragic anniversary of Zhanaozen events to numerous publications on Vladislav Chelok's landmark case. Meanwhile, the official documents do not prove any formal explanation for the internet resource suspension. Right after the press conference, Gulzhan Yergalieva, along with her colleagues, headed to the administrative court, where the judiciaries were trying the lawsuit against the media resource. The plaintiff insisted that the chief editor kept posting information on the website in question till the end of the day, despite receiving a court decree at noon. In turn, the defense party outlined the reason behind the defendant's actions. The chief editor deemed it as her duty to accommodate the interests of more than 20,000 website subscribers by publishing the court ruling on a possible speedy resource termination for unknown reasons. The court session ended with the judge's order to hold Gulzhan Yergalieva liable to a fine of $100 for arrogation, which made a small yet tangible contribution to the state treasury.
Human rights activists conclude that the worst year in the history of modern Kazakhstan is 2012, which was full of unseemly incidents. Other activists say it may be too early to draw conclusions. Our next report explores this year's events.
Human rights activists are summing up the results of 2012 political year, and according to them, it is full of negative achievements. Moreover, they marked it as the worst year in the history of independent Kazakhstan. This year we had the highest number of attacks on media and reporters. Meanwhile, the severity of their crimes is the scariest thing and leaves more destructions than the crimes in the past. This footage serves as a proof of what speakers talked. Bailiffs are trying to zealously break in the office of newspaper Golos Respubliki. I still can't figure out what they were searching for and why, because they didn't explain anything. They searched through all the newspaper files and offices. Out of all unpleasant events in the passing year, the human rights activist Denis Jvaga saw only one positive outcome, which he shares with a bitter laugh. Well, we must feel happy that not all of us were imprisoned at least. We can feel happy that at least for now human rights organizations are not being shut down in large numbers. Nevertheless, some observers say the year hasn't ended yet. The state machine still has to pass the most important exam on December 16th.
A memorial feast in honor of the victims of the Zhanaozen tragedy was held in the cemetery near the town. The relatives and close ones of the deceased honored the memory of those who lost their lives in the bloodshed. Several Kazakhstanis contend December 16th can no longer be counted as a state holiday.
It is unusually crowded at the Tenge Auli cemetery. The memorial service is being held here to honor the memory of those who died during December events in Zhanaozen. Orazali Mambet Nazarov came to his younger brother Orazai's grave. According to Orazali, his brother died after numerous assaults during December 16 tragedy. It's a hard time for us. Our mother is over 80 years old and she's not doing very well now. He has a son left. The people united and came to the memorial service to read a prayer. It was vital for me to join them. Atabergen Duisikhenov, who died after gunshot wounds, is also buried here. The shooters were never found. Atabergen's father has many things to say about his son. My son was a good man and his memory will always be with me. The investigator told me that he had finished all investigative actions on my son's case. He told me to file a new claim to the prosecutor's office. I filed a separate claim to the prosecutor's office on April 14th. There's been no progress on the case since then. Sirikbay Trumov, mayor of Zhanaozen, says that the government can't ban the memorial service. However, the relatives of the deceased are concerned with other issues. May I ask the head of administration one question? I'm a relative of Kosherov. Let us now participate in the memorial service and later you come for an appointment. To the Department of Housing? You can come after lunch. Let's not discuss this here at the cemetery. But it's impossible to get an appointment with you. If you come after lunch today, I'll receive you. What time will you be in? I'll come after lunch. I'll be in my office at 2:30. Tell your guards downstairs to let us in. I'll tell them to let you in. What are we going to do with that young woman left with 2 children? I'll meet you myself. I hope you'll keep your word. Besides local residents, people from other regions of Kazakhstan have also come to the memorial service. Serik Utepkaliyev, public activist from Atyrau, says that after Zhanaozen massacre, December 16 can no longer be celebrated as Independence Day. Everyone says that December 16 is a holiday of independence. I believe this day should not be a holiday. It needs to be marked as the day of national mourning. If we recall the events of 1986 and the last year's events, we'll see that this can be a celebration. This is the day for us to mourn over those who lost their lives. Memorial days over Zhanaozen victims have been planned in other regions of Kazakhstan. However, public activists doubt that local authorities will approve of them.
In the meantime, the head of state marked an entirely different event. As Nursultan Nazarbayev reminded yet again, the capital symbolizes a country's achievements. The president gathered chosen ones at an official reception in honor of the capital's official transfer from Almaty to Astana's 15th anniversary.
Astana, formerly known as Akmola, became a capital on December 10, 1997. Yet people recall that the decision was made during a very difficult economic situation. Nevertheless, nowadays Astana is the most beautiful and competitive place. The former MP Mikhail Tarashikin referred to the capital as the city of the president. In fact, the presidential metropolis is quite expensive. Astana's budget this year amounted to nearly $2 billion. In the meantime, Nazarbayev himself said the following. I had to risk it all. There was no other way back then. We had to show the whole world, including ourselves, what we can do, and we very well did.
Meanwhile, political activists and members of the opposition established the main culprits in last year's disorders in Zhanaozen and Shetpe. Their conclusion was harsh and straightforward. The blame lies on President Nursultan Nazarbayev personally. More on what else the opposition is saying up next.
The public figures and politicians of Astana believe that even a year later, the authorities still haven't learned the lessons from the social and labor conflict that resulted in the bloody tragedy in the west of the country. Approaching the December 16, they analyzed the oil strike shooting in Zhanaozen and Shetpe and convictions of participants of the dramatic events in the west of Kazakhstan. Up to date, neither the Minister of Labor and Social Security nor the Minister of Interior, Mr. Kasimov, nor Attorney General, not even a regional city administration, which which actually allowed these riots were held liable for their actions. Those who gathered at the round table decided to do something that they've been encouraging the officials, the MPs and security officials to do. They watched the videos of police firing at unarmed Zhanaozen residents. This footage is still shocking even a year later. Musagali Duanbekov, who attended the trial over 37 oil workers and security forces who opened fire, also watched the police footage shown in the court. He says the video clearly shows who provoked their unrest. The police wagon drove right into the crowd of people, which was a clear provocation. After the people moved towards the stage, burned down the wagon and so on. It's all been purposely instigated and prepared. The oil workers were the ones to blame for the December riots, which cost the lives and health of dozens of people. The politician Sirikbay Alibayev is convinced that the president shall be personally responsible for this. However, not everyone dares to make public statements of such kind. Not everyone can say that Nazarbayev is to blame. Back in 2004, I told him that he's not the leader. Should 100,000 people or 50,000 people or more specifically blame Nazarbayev for this bloodshed, then we may achieve something. While the official schedule of events is dedicated to the Independence Day, the public figures relate all their activities to Zhanaozen tragedy. On the anniversary of the shooting in the western Kazakhstan, the activists intend to hold a flower-laying ceremony at the flagpole, hold the readings in memory of the victims, and to hold a memorial which already became traditional.
Labor legislation is a field where Kazakh citizens' rights are defended the least, admitted Quvanish Sultanov, the head of a special commission under the president, outside the meeting devoted to the subject. At the meeting itself, however, the labor rights mechanism was portrayed in an entirely different and more positive light.
Nothing extraordinary happened during the roundtable dedicated to the International Human Rights Day. Kazakh representatives are convinced that the country is moving forward successfully. Foreign guests gave their approval. During the break, the head of the Presidential Commission on Human Rights, Quvanish Sultanov, admitted that labor disputes is a vulnerable issue. They were and probably will occur again. Just last week, the senator visited Zhanaozen, which held the most tragic labor conflict in the history of Kazakhstan between the employer and the oil workers. However, the authorities' representative for human rights didn't specify whose rights were violated after all. This was a conflict between the employers and the workers. However, the victims had nothing to do with neither of them. These issues need to be addressed as well. The government assumed the responsibility and allocated enormous funds to fully restore the town. The government even rendered an aid to the entrepreneurs.
December 10th marked the birthday of Roza Tulitaeva, who was convicted to 5 years in prison for the events in Zhanaozen. Her friends were obviously unable to see her personally, instead sending their birthday wishes by telegram and passing her flowers and food through prison guards.
To recap, Roza Tulitaeva is one of the oil workers who was actively involved in a 7-month strike in Zhanaozen last year that ended tragically on December 16. Roza Tulitaeva was shortly arrested and charged with promoting social hatred, organizing and participating in riots. In summer, she was sentenced to 7 years in colony. Later, the sentence was reduced. Roza Tulitaeva will spend 5 years in colony UK/11 in Atyrau. Her attorney says that recently her health has deteriorated. She is currently undergoing a medical examination. Yesterday, Roza's associates gathered at the prison gates. The colony's administration promised to pass the flowers to the woman. We've come here to wish Roza a happy birthday. This is all we can do. The colony's administration has agreed to pass her the flowers that we brought for her. Today is the birthday of a great daughter of Kazakh people, Roza Tulitaeva, and a day of human rights protection. We heard from her attorney that she had some health issues. Her blood tests came in recently, and it seems that the results are okay. Roza loves roses, and we're here to wish her a happy birthday.
Trial over border guard Vladislav Chelach continues in Taldykargan. The soldier accused of mass murder declined to offer final arguments, even forbidding his lawyers to take part in the pleadings. Other details from the courtroom up next.
The private Vladislav Chelach not only refused to participate in judicial pleadings, but also forbade his lawyers to engage in forensic debates of fear to further aggravate his legal plight. I'm not refusing to defend the accused, I'm just upholding the defendant's position. He forbade participating in pleadings as this might harm his current stance. A court assigned you to plead the defendant's case. Besides, you are granted access to classified information, which makes you obliged and authorized to defend the accused in judicial pleadings. However, your statement implies refusal to further represent the defendant. I'm not refusing. Meanwhile, the public defender Zhumaysha Sarjanova did take part in forensic debates after all. She requested acquitting the defendant on several main charges, except arson and firearms possession. Currently, Vladislav Chelok is accused of mass murder of 14 bodyguards and a huntsman at Arkan-Gergen outpost. We assume that the presiding judge has personal interest in the case outcome, as he keeps infringing on the Criminal Procedure Code requirements during the court sessions. The trial is scheduled to continue on Tuesday. Curiously enough, Chelok's relatives chose to skip the Monday court session.
In the meantime, Vladislav Chelok's grandfather Vladimir departed the trial and returned to Karaganda. He met with journalists to tell them about the course of the proceedings over his grandson. Vladimir Chelok accuses the judge of being biased, to say the least.
Prosecutors behave impudently. They ignore all the testimonies, and when Vladislav starts to speak, they cut him off and leave for a meeting. Moreover, when it comes to serious issue which needs to be discussed and requires a decision, the judge breaks the session and leaves for a meeting. I've never seen such a messy court where the judge consults with the victims on what measure of restraint to apply for Vladislav. The corrupt judge won't make a right decision. Moreover, Vladimir Chelok insists that court hinders the attorney Sarsenov to fully defend his client. They deny him an access to a number of important documents. According to Vladimir Chelok, the relatives of the victims are ready to lynch Vladislav right in the courtroom. In fact, he believes that psychologists supposedly set them against the defendant before the trial. Chelok's family doesn't believe there is justice in Kazakhstan and therefore intend to prove the innocence of Vladislav Chelok in the International Hague Court. On Sunday, the defendant made a written statement which pointed out that security officials exerted pressure and missiled him. Vladimir Chelok quoted the statement. The NSC colonel visited Vladislav in his cell and offered him to help the investigators. He suggested that Vladislav takes all the blame, which will ensure the criminals responsible for the incident that they are no longer under surveillance and allow to arrest them. Then he will be released. However, they didn't arrest anyone and now they charged it against him.
In another trial, this time over former head of Sarybokter border post Alexei Fomin, the defendant did voice his final arguments. The officer is accused of violating regulations of serving in the outpost and for inaction during the tragic events in Arkan-Gergen. The prosecution asked to sentence Fomin to 10 years in prison. The officer announced he sees no logic in the accusations and noted the mistakes committed by his higher-ups.
What exact actions were taken by the officials responsible for the organization and operation of Arkan-Gergen border post in case of danger, particularly when it didn't go on air on time? I have, as already said and repeated, only 6 soldiers and 8 contractors at my border posts, whereas the unit had more soldiers and resources to solve this problem. In his speech, Fomin said that participants in the process have tried to shield themselves. According to him, the management of the unit in Ucharal was informed about the absence of communication with Arkan-Gergen border outpost. Therefore, the defense of the border guard insists the defendant had no intention and malice, which proves his innocence. In addition, there are no documents proving his responsibility for Arkan-Gergen border post. Meanwhile, it is expected that the verdict in the case will be announced on December 12th.
In the meantime, retirees are besieging the Almaty prosecutor's office. The elderly resorted to such a desperate measure because of their dissatisfaction with the work of the supervising body. They demand to immediately deal with violations enumerated in their demands. Details up next.
The pensioner Rufina Galimzyanova perceives the public prosecution office proceedings as a ping-pong game. Watching her family's ongoing litigation, the woman has given up hope for justice. Along with other Berkut movement activists complaining against judicial corruption, she brought a complaint to the Almaty prosecution office. The journalists were invited to witness the action, as the Berkut members consider independent mass media to be the only friendly force sharing their outlaw status. Suppressing the opposition mass media is extremity. If this last resort is smothered, we will have no other option but to strike a pose. The organizations that are supposed to protect people's interests do nothing but evade the issues. We keep filing complaints and petitions, but all we get in response is yet another runaround. This makes us feel deceived. The former history teacher Yergazy Kuandyk also has reasons to feel deceived. Last year he raised the corruption issue at the university, which was immediately followed by his dismissal. Now he keeps pestering the government officials, but all in vain. I had an appointment with the Deputy General Prosecutor Kravchenko and the General Prosecutor Dolbaev himself. None of them kept the promises. All I got was an official response stating that my arguments were groundless despite the heap of supporting documents I provided earlier. Nelly Filimonova lost her son 2.5 years ago. The murderer was found but got acquitted later. The woman is convinced that such verdict was only possible in a totally corrupt judicial system. I wonder what the public prosecution duties really are. I thought it was supposed to defend the injured and aggrieved ones. Meanwhile, in my case, it just took over the criminal's side. I call this a no man, no problem approach. I'm convinced that the murderer bribed the judiciaries. The pensioners couldn't make it further than the prosecutor's assistant. They filed the complaints and are now awaiting response. In case if they don't get due attention from the officials, the Berkut activists are planning to make a disturbance near the Prosecutor General's office and even the presidential administration.
An unknown citizen of Kazakhstan paid $40 million for a 4-bedroom apartment in one of London's most well-off regions. According to the newspaper Property Observer, the elite piece of real estate was purchased in the famed One Hyde Park.
Only world's wealthiest people can afford to buy apartments in this residential complex. Vladimir Kim, the head of the corporation Kazakhmys, was one of the first owners. Tens, if not hundreds, square meters of luxury complex belong to the Prime Minister of Qatar and to one of the governors of Emirate of Sharjah. The rich Russians are also residing there. In total, the luxurious apartments are owned by people from 25 different countries. However, the publication doesn't report who of Kazakhstan people has bought an apartment in the most expensive residential complex in the world.
Newly refurbished trams began coursing Pavlodar city. Transportation officials promise these new coaches will be much more comfortable. Our correspondents took one such tram for a test ride.
From now on, the Pavlodar residents will ride with comfort. Local tramway companies started modernization of tramcars. The old tramcars literally received a second life. The tramcars of Pavlodar tram depot are run down by 90%. Most of the tramcars designed for 20 years of service operated more than 30 years. It can't yet afford new tramcars, so the local carrier took on to repair the old ones. First of all, they started with interior of the tramcars by insulating and equipping it with quality lighting. The passengers say that comfort and heating are very important factors, and not only in the home kitchen. I ride on tramcars every day, and of course it is desirable to have them well heated, especially the freezing winter days. It would be nice to have all tramcars renovated so they exert comfort and beauty. It turns out that not only passengers benefit from the modernization, but also the carriers. The tramcars will be equipped with special energy-saving systems that will save up the energy by 50%. If the carrier will manage to save up, it is possible that it will reduce fares. We will see the effects only if all 65 tramcars get modernized and 50 get renovated. Only then we will see the result. After that, we can start talking about reducing the fares. Inspired by the success of modernization, the carriers now set sights on acquisition of new trams. They promise that new trams, nowhere to be found in Kazakhstan, will soon appear in Pavlodar.
A do-it-yourself gift. A garage sale exhibition of handmade New Year and Christmas gifts is being held in Almaty. We turn to the next and final story for more.
Polymer clay jewelry boxes made from a shoebox, shawls made of natural wools once again prove that handmade gifts remain the best presents ever. A little imagination and perseverance is the main secret of these masterpieces. I've made this from a good old jacket and a cardigan. It can be used as a gift or as a box for some small items. The amateur craftsmen are in the majority. For them, it's a hobby and an extra income. However, it is not easy to learn how to work with clay, wool or glass, and we can always choose whether to do it on our own or buy such things from skilled craftsmen. What distinguishes these things from other gifts is their originality. Everything is made of natural merino wool with the inclusion of Uzbek silk. We follow our grandmother's traditions. We felt, dye and tease wool by hand. The exhibition Almaty Garage Sale has already become a tradition for the city. The city residents have always had craving for art. That is why there is never a lack of craftsmen and those who highly value the handmade gifts. Almaty residents are always interested in unusual things. Most importantly, many people buy or at least browse the items of the exhibition. Many of our craftsmen do not have a professional painting or crafting background. They are the people who discovered their artistic talents and are now exploiting them. The exhibition will be held every weekend until the new year. It should be noted that the prices are very reasonable.
That is all we have time for now. Thank you for watching. See you tomorrow.